Good morning and welcome to a special edition of Let It Be Known on this Monday, April 11th, 2022. There was a time not so long ago when someone with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's immense qualifications would have sailed through confirmation hearings and win near unanimous support in the Senate chamber. But with the nation as polarized as it has ever been politically, the reality is that conservatives have chosen to ignore qualification or judicial philosophies. Uh, this was the issue they had a sticking point with because she would not answer that question of what is a woman or what makes a woman. While Judge Jackson was finally able to break the proverbial glass ceiling as the first Black woman confirmed to the nation's highest court, her confirmation came with a loud reminder that white privilege, white supremacy, and white men in particular, and white ideals are not much different than when Thurgood Marshall became the first Black Supreme Court justice. By the time Thurgood Marshall was nominated in 1967, he was already a legend for having dismantled Jim Crow segregation in state and federal courts across America, including his stint as lead counsel in 1954's Brown versus Board of Education decision. President Lyndon B. Johnson nominated Thurgood Marshall even as he himself was a Southerner who used racist rhetoric regularly. Appallingly, on Marshall's appointment to the Supreme Court, LBJ's biographer, Robert Dallek, noted that the former president said that he wanted to appoint the famous Marshall instead of a lesser-known Black judge because, quote, when I appoint a nigger to the bench, I want everyone to know that he is a nigger. LBJ's Black chauffeur, Robert Parker, wrote in his memoirs, Capitol Hill in Black and White, that the then president once asked him whether he preferred to be referred to by his first name rather than boy or nigger or chief. When Parker said he would prefer being called by his name, LBJ grew angry and said, as long as you are Black, you're going to be Black till the day you die. No one's going to call you by your name. So no matter what you are called, nigger, you just let it roll off your back like water and you'll make it. Just pretend you're a piece of furniture. Marshall attacked the longstanding doctrine established in the Supreme Court's 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson ruling, which allowed states to exclude people from public facilities because of their race, provided they had access to a separate but equal facility. Since there was no comparable law school for Black students in Maryland, Marshall argued the all-white school must integrate. Marshall won, and Maryland was forced to integrate the law school. But the case was not taken to the Supreme Court, so it set a precedent in Maryland only. As we go on, Marshall's greatest impact was on civil rights, but mostly through in 1991, we segue to George H.W. Bush nominating Clarence Thomas for a seat on the Supreme Court. Just 5 days after civil rights icon Thurgood Marshall announced that he was retiring after 24 years. Thomas, despite an impressive resume, had served as a federal judge for only 19 months. None of the American Bar Association Standing Committee for the Federal Judiciary members rated him well qualified. Near the end of his hearing, a former employee of Thomas named Anita Hill came forward with sensational allegations of sexual harassment. The testimony took 3 days, with the hearing broadcast live. The nation collectively expressed shock, and most became transfixed and deeply divided. Knowing this history, and further knowing that despite the overtly racist rhetoric and acts during the 1960s, that Marshall was still confirmed by a supermajority vote in the Senate, and Thomas was narrowly confirmed in the early 1990s, helps us to better appreciate why Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson in 2022 looked the devil in the eye and became the first Black woman justice on the Supreme Court. It also helped to once again bring to the fore that despite the success of many African Americans, this country is determined that it doesn't want to accept or even remotely live up to Dr. King's dream about not being judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. This morning, we discussed all of that, with Lauren Burke of the Burke File and our great NNPA Capitol Hill reporter that she is, James Wright of the Washington Informer, and Robin Massengill. Robin, James, Lauren, and attorney Robert Tarver. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Good. So, James, I know you're the historian of the bunch, so I'm going to start with you. Lyndon Johnson biographers noted his rampant racist views, yet he got through civil rights laws, voting laws, and the first Black Supreme Court justice. Clearly, that wasn't enough to quell America's race problems, as over 54 years later, Judge Jackson's nomination, as we said, was met in the Senate with overt racism. Do we need more Black and minorities on the Supreme Court? And would that matter given the pulse of this country, James?
Yes, we do need more. Oh, and good morning. Yes, we do need more people of color on the Supreme Court. A quick point about LBJ. My aunt used to work for LBJ. LBJ was actually a civil rights crusader from the time he came into the Senate into the House of Representatives in the 1940s. He was just a Central Texas boy who liked to call things as it is. He helped a lot of Mexican Americans go to college when he was a teacher. So that's the history of LBJ. Let me just say that you're right. We need more minorities on the Supreme Court as well as the Court of Appeals. And I want to point out something to you. And not a lot of people talk about this, Stacey, but when Judge Jackson takes her seat in October, for the first time in American history, white males will be the minority on the U.S. Supreme Court. For the first time, white males will be the minority on the Supreme Court. That is a substantial achievement.
Well, Lauren Burke, all things Capitol Hill, Supreme Court, whatever. We got Lauren, and there's no better one, better journalist to take care of this. But Lauren, does that matter?
Oh, absolutely, it matters. In fact, when on Friday, when Vice President Harris pointed out that there would be 4 women, I was sort of standing in the back of the lawn there thinking, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even realize with the 4 women, obviously, when Judge Jackson takes the Supreme Court bench. So, yeah, it absolutely matters. It is, I think, a telling thing about our very partisan politics right now that if you look at the Thurgood Marshall vote back in 1967, it was 69-11. There were a number of very interesting senators who, for whatever reason, did not vote on Thurgood Marshall, including Harry Byrd and John Stennis. But you still had, 69 senators say, okay, Thurgood Marshall should serve on the bench. And what we just saw last week, where one of the most qualified jurists in the history of the Supreme Court can barely get in there, 53-47. And we get Rand Paul passive aggressively deciding to show up late for the vote. And then we get Republican senators walking out after Vice President Harris. And remember, Vice President Harris in herself is a historic figure. So you have a historic figure announcing another historic figure, both of whom are Black women. And you have white male senators making sure that they walk out of the chamber while that is happening, while the cameras are rolling, understanding that the cameras are rolling, wanting to do that as the cameras are rolling. That all followed the fact that we watched 5 Republican white male senators, once again, because remember, the Judiciary Committee only has one female Republican on it. Even though there's like 9 female Republicans in U.S. Senate, they can figure out a way to only get one on that committee. The committee that had all white men on it when the Kavanaugh nomination had. So they did what during that confirmation? They tried to marry the first Black woman to be nominated for the Supreme Court to sexual deviancy. That was their plan. That was what they wanted to do. That's what they wanted to be on camera doing. That's what they wanted to message to their supporters. What does that say about the modern Republican Party? The Republican Party of the 1960s didn't even try to do that. The Jim Crow Republican Party didn't even try to do that. Mm-hmm. And I know that, there's a Dixiecrat issue there too. But what I'm saying is the white male Dixiecrat edition of our country didn't even try to do that. So let's think about that for a second.
Well, Robin, that plays right into, I guess, what I was saying, that America still has a white supremacy problem. And perhaps more importantly, we saw the confirmation hearings and all the dog whistles and the overt, not just the dog whistles, but the overt racism there. Is there something Judge Jackson will be able to do on the bench to help make a difference, or is that asking too much?
I think Judge Jackson's presence on the Supreme Court as the first Black woman in and of itself will be impactful. Interestingly, when I spoke with other Black women yesterday about what they saw as her potential on the court, and some of the women that I spoke with felt like she would have to tone down herself, that she would have to dumb herself down on the court. I actually do not believe that. I actually believe that she will be effective. I think that she will bring some integrity to the court that the court is sorely lacking. I think that, when somebody as powerful and as dignified as Ketanji Brown Jackson walks into the halls of the Supreme Court, when you have a Kavanaugh and, I can't even remember her name. She was so just a non-issue for me. I think that upgrades the standard for them. And if they rise to the occasion, then I think she will be impactful just in her presence alone. On the decisions, I think where she will be most impactful is in her dissents, as I've said before.
Yeah, Attorney Tarver, Austin Cooper writes in that we need more minorities on the court who remember their roots, unlike Clarence Thomas. And with that, I'm pressing go and let you.
Well, look, just to answer your original question, America does have a race problem, and history suggests to us that America will have a race problem as long as it exists. Quite frankly, every society where race is an issue and ethnicity is an issue, those problems continue, and they just never seem to eradicate. But look, it's not that we need people of color on the bench. It's that we need people who have the right philosophical bend, the right judicial temperament, the right understanding of our history as Black people and our role in this nation, the right understanding of where we are, what we have been through, and where we are going. And there's nothing wrong with bringing that to the bench, because that perspective has not been heard, has not been put before the court by a Black woman. That's why Ketanji Brown Jackson is going to be important. Now, you see what it brings us when we just look at color. It brought us a Clarence Thomas. And he is, from my view, he is a charlatan, a legal charlatan, who is not even found to be well qualified. And that's one of the things I think is really significant. We're sitting here and we're talking about Clarence Thomas as if he should be an accepted justice from our point of view on the Supreme Court. He's an illegitimate justice because he's found to be not well qualified. And that's a significant thing when your peers say, hey, you know what? This person's going forward, but he's not qualified. And don't forget, let's talk about Clarence Thomas for 1 minute. As they tried to, as Lauren said, marry Judge Brown Jackson to sexual deviancy, remember, Clarence Thomas talked about his collection of pornographic erotica. This justice of the Supreme Court was wide open in talking about his collection of erotica. Now, okay, that may not be a crime, and that may not even be a problem. But if you're going to try to marry this justice to something like that, let's really look at history and see what history tells us about erotica and sexual deviancy, and a judge who was actually accused of improper sexual acts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of Clarence Thomas, Lauren, James, Robin, what may let's go inside his head for a second if we can. What might he have been thinking?
We'll be very lonely there. We'll be very lonely.
What might have he been thinking when Judge Jackson was confirmed?
I actually met Clarence Thomas in his chambers when I think I was working at ABC News at the time. They at the Supreme Court have these massive offices. I wasn't surprised the other day to see that he had met with Herschel Walker, who's running for the Senate in Georgia, because he's a big Georgia Bulldog fan, and he had a Georgia Bulldog helmet on his shelf. And Clarence Thomas, like a lot of people who have views that you can't match with the personality, was actually a very personable guy. But let's understand that he's there for a reason. He's there because he's the Black guy who generally hates other Black people when it comes to substance and the law. And that's why the Republicans love him, because as I always say, the Republicans only love Black people who hate Black people. So they, of course, nominate him to be the symbol of that, to be the symbol of nothing that has anything to do with racial justice. And as really a thumb in the eye of the entire seat that was, of course, Thurgood Marshall's seat. So Clarence Thomas, if you listen to what he says legally, I don't see how you come up to any conclusion that this isn't a legal version of Stephen and Django Unchained. It's basically a self-hatred issue going on there, and some sort of odd, reasoning behind things that we already know have been historically established. To me, Sonia Sotomayor is the voice of the Black civil rights movement on bench. She really is. And I think she will continue to be. I think what we're going to find out is that Judge Jackson is a little bit more conservative and a little less Thurgood Marshall and a lot more Stephen Breyer than we thought. So, but we'll see what happens.
You know,
Stacey, let me
go
say
ahead,
this
James.
about Clarence Thomas. I had the opportunity to interview him in 1995 with my friend Armstrong Williams, and he is my friend. And Donna Brazile happened to be in the room. And, you know, I wrote an article. Basically, Justice Thomas said that he's not an Uncle Tom, and he talked about those things. And the Washington Post picked up my article, and it went international because I was interviewed for the next 4 days by a whole bunch of people. I was one of these people, Lauren, Robert, and Ms. Massengale, who was thinking, okay, this guy's going to change. He's going to change. He's going to get on the court. It's going to be a lifetime appointment. He's going to do what Harry Blackmun did. Barry Blackman, a former Ku Klux Klan person, you know, became very progressive. He's going to do what Harry Blackman did, but he hasn't, and he's been a disappointment.
Yeah, Robin and Attorney Tarver, well, for the whole panel, I was looking at a case just this morning that really needs to be a Supreme Court issue, in my opinion. A young lady in Rochester, New York, Black couple, her and her boyfriend, the police raided their home some time ago, thinking, mistakenly believing he was a drug dealer. We heard that before, right? Mm-hmm. But they confiscated $8,000 in cash and other items. He was acquitted. She was never charged with anything. In fact, the authorities said that there was no reason for them to even talk to her. It was her money that they took. Well, this has been a couple of years now. She's fighting to get her money back. And recently they offered her half of it back. They said she missed some deadlines to reclaim seized property and things of that nature. And then as I read into this more, I realize that more and more people allow this to go on because really even lawyers are not really clear on these deadlines to get your property back and things of that nature. Shouldn't that be a Supreme Court issue? She's innocent, and she says she can't get her money back.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it should be a Supreme Court issue because the remedies are actually there. And here's where the problem is. The problem is that you have a criminal case on one side and forfeiture is actually a civil procedure. So you're actually dealing with two different courts. And generally, for most people who do not have means, if they have a public defender is not authorized in most cases to operate in the civil courts and to meet those civil deadlines. But you know what? It's a broader picture here because it's a broader picture of personal integrity and personal liberties that this court is going to have to take up. And unfortunately, in order to move to the right on cases like Roe and Heller and other cases that have been before the court and will come before the court in other forms, they are going to have to erode some of the cases that already exist that deal with personal liberty. The Griswold case, things like that say that there is that you have a personal liberty, a right to personal integrity. Now, interestingly enough, the Constitution doesn't give you a right to personal integrity. That is a legal fiction. That's something that was created by the court in cases like Griswold and others. I would not be surprised if we start to see this court start to erode those personal freedoms. And that's going to be a problem for all of us.
Wow.
I got to disagree with that a little bit. I actually think that Roberts can surprise us sometimes on his vote on certain things. I don't know about civil asset forfeiture cases, but I definitely suspect that we're going to hear some arguments on Time Sullivan, which is defamation law that definitely needs to be changed because at this moment, there is no equal protection for elected officials who get defamed, period. If somebody comes out and calls you a rapist in public and it gets in the paper, you have zero legal recourse if you have any sort of official title in front of your name. That is just a fact. Now, we're going to find out whether or not Johnny Depp, who is not a elected official, but we're going to find out in Fairfax, near where I am, whether or not he's going to win that one. But Time Sullivan is in the sights of this Supreme Court, and I can see the votes happening for what would probably be an argument on personal, how somebody is damaged and why somebody who's damaged that's an elected official is somehow not protected equally under the law.
Yeah.
Lauren, you're right, but just remember, even with Roberts, they are 5-4 at that point. Because right now they're 6-3. And this has been my contention all along, that the problem with this court is that Roberts does not want his name attached to some of this craziness. Now, Roberts has always been a proponent. Roberts has always been a proponent of Roe, of overturning those things. But he's seeing some of these other things where we've seen him weigh in on the other side. Just remember, we had the Warren Court, we had the Burger Court, and now this is the Roberts Court for all history to review and see. I just don't believe he wants his name attached to that. But he is being hijacked here. He doesn't have a real choice. He is on the downside of a lot of these cases that he doesn't even philosophically believe in as a conservative.
Well,
Yeah.
I am so interested in seeing how this Johnny Depp thing turns out, Lauren. That's a very interesting call right there. Robin,
Yes, it is.
yeah, we'll see, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about that. Robin, there's always talk of limiting the terms of Supreme Court justices who sit on the bench for life if they choose. Should term limits be set, or given the ever deterioration of democracy in America, would it even matter?
I actually am at this point, given the posture of the country, I don't think that people like Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Kavanaugh, people that are not qualified to be on the bench, should have a lifetime position that is, regardless, they're basically moved politically. So I am for term limits for the Supreme Court. I'm not sure what that number would be, but I just don't think that people that are not qualified, but that also have political agendas, should be on the court for a lifetime.
Yeah, James, I certainly wanted you to weigh in on that as well.
With all due respect to Robin, I disagree. I believe that they should stay lifetime appointments. I think the problem is that you have these people, these presidents, who are appointing these people and not properly vetting them, just like President Trump did not properly vet his people. And I mean that with that Neil Gorsuch also. So I do believe they should be lifetime appointments, and I'm against expanding the court too, adding more justices. We just have to work around this craziness in the system.
The issue is they were vetted, and I think that the Republicans are, are atrocious. So they put some of the worst people on the bench. And I think that's part of their plan, is to muddy the waters and to muddy the country and to muddy dialogue and muddy the law, which they have done effectively. So they were vetted. They were, they were not seen as qualified. They are not what I would consider pure jurists, like excellent at what they do, like Ketanji is. And so, but yet the Senate still voted them in. So I understand what you're saying, and that's I respect your opinion, but absolutely not a lifetime appointment for unqualified political judges.
Every state in the country has some form of limitation on the term of judges. Now, I would never have believed in term limits up until the present political climate. But now we have become so entrenched that there is no longer a pure process. We saw political theater playing out. We saw entrenchment on both sides. People are not moving either way. And I don't like to do, what do you call it? Whataboutism. That's not what it is. But we're seeing pure entrenchment now. And the only way around this is to be able to say there is a limit to how long a justice will serve. It doesn't affect the justice's perspective. In other words, it's not like they're elected. They're appointed to perhaps 70 or 75. And quite frankly, when you've got justices up there who are 89 and close to 90 years old, I'm sorry, I have those people of that age group around me, and I'm not sure that they should be in a position necessarily, all of them, of making the decisions that require intellectual rigor. And I'm not sure that many of their clerks are not the actual justices in some of these cases. So I believe that we do need to have some sort of alteration. I'm not looking for expansion, but you have to do something to deal with the present paradigm.
Lauren, expanding the court, is that ever the answer?
No, I'm against expanding the court. I'm against term limits on the court. What the issue is the United States Senate. The issue is electoral politics. The issue is votes in the United States Senate and how we get justices to the Supreme Court. The least qualified sitting on the Supreme Court right now is Amy Coney Barrett. And the most qualified, if we just look at hard facts, will be Judge Jackson. I actually think Kavanaugh was qualified. I think the spectacle that we saw was the result of politics in our country being completely crazy and off the rails. It's one thing to say that maybe you think it matters that a 16-year-old jumped on a 15-year-old who was drunk back in the 1980s. If we say that that matters, that's fine. If she says that she feels like she might have been raped, that's fine. I totally believed Christine Blasey Ford's story. I believed her fears at the time. What I didn't believe and what I think was off the rails was when we got Julie Swetnick and Deborah Ramirez in there and the Democrats just trying to effectively derail Kavanaugh's nomination with zero due process and a flim-flam investigation, which that part wasn't their fault. That was Trump and the FBI, whatever. But that is not the process that we should be having to put somebody on the Supreme Court. I hate to agree with Lindsey Graham, but that is not the process. If that happened to Ketanji Jackson, we would be upset. We were upset when we saw what happened to Ketanji Jackson, which should not have happened. They lied about her record and tried to brand her to sexual deviancy. It was crazy, and it was not in evidence. And what happened to Kavanaugh was not in evidence with regard to Ms. Swetnick and Ms. Ramirez. It became a crazy show. So I understand that it's hard to watch these things when it's people we disagree, we ideologically disagree with, like Brett Kavanaugh. But Brett Kavanaugh, in fact, was qualified to serve on the court. I think you can make a very reasonable argument that Amy Coney Barrett was not. But the fact of the matter is the president of the United States gets to decide that. And that would be Joe Biden and in the other case, of course, Donald Trump. And how do you fix that with election politics?
I just want to respond to one thing. I agree with you, Lauren, that yeah, if the Senate were working effectively, then it should happen. But we really have a dog chasing his own tail here because you have the Supreme Court that reinforces the laws of gerrymandering and other election laws that allows for the Senate to be packed with Republicans who disproportionately represent America in districts where they should not. And so how do you break that cycle when the court has now created the mechanism, the very mechanism that allows it to be strengthened with conservatives that will never be broken? The only way you can do it,
the Democrats broke it in Florida. I mean, the Democrats broke it in Georgia. They broke it in Georgia despite all of what was happening. They probably could do it in Florida. So you've got to get the votes. I know it's always been difficult for us. This is not a new story. This is a 300, 400-year story. It's always been like this. In fact, it's been worse. It's been a lot worse. And we've been able to figure it out.
We have about 2 minutes left. And with that, you go nicely into the last part of this is with Judge Jackson, we now will have had 3 Black Supreme Court justices confirmed, right? Sit on the bench. We've had a Black president and a Black vice president. Yet African Americans are still prevented from reaching our full potential. People say vote, and many do. But what else can or should be done to claim our rightful space in a country built mostly on the backs of Black people?
It's twofold. Look, we're like everyone else. But the fact of the matter is we have internal struggles, I think, as Lauren is alluding to, that we need to get together. We need to vote. We need to increase our presence. We need to do what we can do to move the ball forward. That's the only thing that we could do at this point. Our history is really incredible. I mean, in terms of Clarence Thomas versus Thurgood Marshall, as I said, we're like everyone else. We have good apples, bad apples from our political and social perspective.
Yeah,
all right, let's go around the corner. James, we'll get to
I agree with Attorney Tarver. We're diverse. People need to vote. They really need to vote. I mean, voting makes a whole lot of difference.
And Robin, then we'll let Lauren take us home.
And I agree with the issue about voting. I think that we're in a place for Black folks and for the country that we need more. There has to be something for us to vote for. I mean, I understand. We're in a more difficult place, I think, than we have been in a while. To the extent that, yes, we got Joe Biden in, but what has he delivered outside of Ketanji Brown Jackson and outside of the infrastructure bill? And so I think, yes, it's imperative for us to vote, but I think we're gonna have a very difficult time getting people out to the polls if we do not get something. We can organize all we want. We've been doing that. We can do all grassroots efforts as we've been doing, but we're getting hammered by the Republicans on voting rights and on gerrymandering. So what else can we what else can we do? We need to have a different kind of action coming from politicians too that get people to the polls, because I think we're gonna have a difficult time in 2022 and 2024.
Yeah, David Youngblood, before Lauren, you go, David Youngblood writes that blacks will not have the same freedoms next year as we do now with this court. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, we don't know that. I mean, voting obviously is a baseline, but we always have to understand that unlike any other constituency, we really have no allies. You know, African Americans have no allies, right? So we always have to be convincing white Democrats to do things like investing in states that, like the Louisiana Senate race, for example, where we have a black guy running against John Kennedy, which they're probably not going to invest in. I mean, the money has to be there. So, you know, the problem is that, you know, we're always supposed to be magical Negroes in Georgia every single cycle. And to do that requires money. You know, I'm stealing Cliff Albright's lines right now. There, you know, Stacey Abrams was right. If you get black people to the polls, Democrats win. Somehow the Democratic Party hasn't figured this out when it comes to the money. So we keep going around that circle. But we see now there's several black candidates for the United States Senate. You know, I have no idea why that would not be front of mind. And I have no idea why Joe Biden gets up during State of the Union after what we saw after George Floyd and talks about funding police. I mean, in a direct middle finger to your base constituency in front of the world. Why? You need that constituency to win this November. So the very least you could do is say nothing. But to go out of your way to signal that, oh, no, we're not doing black voters what you want done, we're going to do something else. That is, to me, is craziness. But, you know, a bunch of white consultants at the White House got a hold of him. Jim Carville got a hold of him on the phone, just like they got a hold of Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, which is why he lost, right? And now, you know, you want to talk about funding police. That to me is what we always have to fight as black people, that no other constituency has to fight. Our issues are life and death, unlike any of these other constituencies. I can name 3 or 4 life and death things, which police brutality would be one of them. And yet, you know, here we are. So voting is just the beginning of it. We have to vote with an ultimatum. We have to vote and say, we're not voting for you unless you do this. And that's coming. We're getting close to that, because you're hearing people say now, I'm sick of this. We're not doing this again, because you couldn't pass the George Floyd. You couldn't pass the John Lewis bill on voting rights. You couldn't pass the George Floyd Policing Act. So what am I voting for? So the Democratic Party has to be very careful, because they're about to lose it all. And I don't know that they realize that.
Well, James and I are going to put Tarver up for the Supreme Court. That's the bottom line right there. Attorney Tarver, get ready to go through that process.
I won't be this person, I tell you that.
Oh my God! Oh my gosh! Oh
there
my
it is, and that we will let that be the last word right there. Thanks so much, Lauren Burke, as always. Robert Massengill, as always. James,
thank you.
Right, and of course, Attorney Robert Tarver of the Tarver Law Firm in New Jersey. Look him up, y'all. He is Supreme Court worthy in our view, so check him out. We thank you for joining. Let it be known. We'll see you tomorrow.